An exhausted Latina waitress named Maya Torres serves her last customer of a brutal double shift when he suddenly collapses. A massive heart attack. Without hesitation, she drops to her knees and performs CPR, fighting death itself to save the life of a man she's never met, a man who barely looked at her when she served his coffee. A simple act of courage that she never thought would lead to anything more. But 3 days later, a convoy of 3 black Mercedes arrives at her run-down apartment building in the poorest part of Seattle, and a woman in a designer suit that costs more than Maya's annual rent steps out, with a briefcase full of documents and an offer that could save Maya's drowning family, or destroy everything she's built on her own terms, everything she's trying to teach her children about what really matters in this world. What was it about this chance encounter that turned Maya's world upside down? How did saving one life set off a chain reaction that would test every value she'd ever taught her children? And when offered a fortune for doing the right thing, what choice would you make? But before we dive in, comment below where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary choices, subscribe to join this journey. Maya Torres was drowning. Not dramatically, not suddenly, slowly, the way most single mothers drown in America, one bill at a time, one overdrawn account at a time, one impossible choice at a time. At 32, she worked double shifts at Rosario's Diner in downtown Seattle, her feet aching in worn sneakers held together with duct tape and prayers. The sneakers had been white once. Now they were gray, the laces frayed, the soles so thin she could feel every crack in the diner's tile floor. Every morning, she'd wake at 5 a.m. in their cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a building that should have been condemned years ago. The heater rattled, but barely worked. The windows leaked cold air, but it was home. At least for now. At least until the landlord made good on his threats. Her daughter Emma, 8 years old, with her father's dark eyes and Maya's stubborn chin, and son Lucas, 5, still asleep in the bed they shared. She'd stand in their doorway for just a moment, watching them breathe, their faces peaceful, in a way that broke her heart. Then she'd kiss their foreheads, careful not to wake them, and slip out before they opened their eyes. She'd leave breakfast on the counter, whatever she could manage. Cereal if they had milk, toast if the bread wasn't moldy, and notes, always notes, written on the backs of old receipts or torn napkins, little messages with hearts drawn in the margins. Love you bigger than the sky. Be good for Abuela. Mama will be home tonight. The bus ride to the diner took 40 minutes through Seattle's pre-dawn darkness. Maya would watch the city wake up through smudged windows, watch other exhausted people heading to jobs that paid too little and demanded too much. She wasn't special. She was one of thousands, one of millions. The diner was her second home, had been for 6 years now. Hot coffee that burned your tongue. Short order chaos, the sizzle of bacon, the clatter of plates, the constant ding of the bell. The rhythm of it all had become part of her heartbeat. Slide the plates across the counter. Refill the coffee. Smile even when your feet are screaming. Smile even when the customer is rude. Smile because the tip might mean Lucas's inhaler gets refilled this month. She knew every regular. Old Mr. Patterson, who came in at 6 a.m. sharp, always ordered 2 eggs over easy and wheat toast, always left exactly $2.50. Mrs. Kim, who worked nights at the hospital and stopped in for coffee before heading home, who asked about Emma and Lucas, who sometimes slipped Maya an extra 5 when she thought no one was looking. It wasn't much, this life, but it was honest work. And Maya had promised herself, promised her children, promised her abuela who raised her, after her parents died in a car crash when she was 9, she would never compromise her values for money. Never. Table 12's getting impatient, her manager Marco called out, his voice cutting through the dinner rush noise. Maya grabbed the coffee pot, the glass warm in her hand, and headed over. The man at table 12 looked like he owned impatience. Owned it, trademarked it, probably had a patent on it. Expensive watch that gleamed even in the diner's fluorescent lights. Tailored suit in charcoal gray that probably cost more than Maya made in 3 months. Typing furiously on his phone with one hand while his food, a $12 burger that he'd barely touched, went cold. "More coffee, sir?" Maya asked with practiced politeness. The kind of politeness that was part of the uniform that you put on like the stained apron. He waved dismissively, without looking up, without even acknowledging she was human, was there, was anything more than furniture. She refilled his cup anyway. That's when she noticed the sweat beading on his forehead, despite the diner's aggressive air conditioning. The gray tint to his skin like old newspaper. The way his hand trembled slightly as he set down his phone. "Sir, are you feeling okay?" Maya asked, leaning closer. He opened his mouth to respond, probably to tell her to mind her own business, probably to complain about the coffee or the noise or something that didn't matter, when his eyes went wide, terrified. He clutched his chest with both hands, fingers clawing at his expensive tie like it was strangling him. Then he slumped forward, hard. His phone clattered to the floor, screen cracking. His coffee cup tipped, dark liquid spreading across the table like blood. The diner went silent. That horrible silence when everyone knows something terrible is happening, but no one knows what to do. Maya's training from the community center CPR class. The free class she'd taken 2 years ago, sitting in a folding chair in a room that smelled like industrial cleaner, practicing on a plastic dummy while Emma and Lucas played in the corner, kicked in instantly. She didn't think. Thinking would have meant fear. She acted. She caught him as he fell, her small frame somehow supporting his weight, lowering him to the ground with a control that surprised her. "Someone call 911, she shouted, already checking for a pulse at his neck. Weak, irregular, barely there. Oh God. Oh God, please. She tilted his head back, checked his airway. Started compressions. 1, 2, 3. Counting in her head, because if she stopped counting, she'd panic. And if she panicked, this stranger would die on the floor of Rosario's diner. And she wouldn't let that happen. The other diners watched in frozen horror. Marco stood behind the counter, phone to his ear, talking to the 911 operator. "Come on," Maya whispered between counts, her voice barely audible over the sound of her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. "Stay with me. Come on. You're not dying here. Not today." Her arms burned. Sweat dripped into her eyes. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. 30 compressions. 2 rescue breaths. 30 more compressions. 2 minutes felt like 2 hours. Felt like forever. Then the paramedics burst through the door, bringing cold air and urgent voices and equipment that beeped and flashed. They took over, their hands sure and practiced, working with the efficiency of people who do this every day. They loaded him onto a stretcher, working around the IV lines and oxygen mask. The equipment beeped urgently, a sound Maya would hear in her nightmares. As they wheeled him toward the door, one paramedic, a woman with kind eyes and gray hair, pulled back in a tight bun, turned back to Maya. "You saved his life," she said. "We got a pulse. Another minute and—" She shook her head, didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. "That was good work. Really good work." Maya stood there in the middle of the diner, her apron splattered with spilled coffee, her hands trembling so hard she had to clasp them together. Her knees felt weak. Her breath came in short gasps. Marco walked over, his usually stern face soft with concern. He patted her shoulder awkwardly. "Take the rest of the night off. Go home. Get some rest. You earned it." Maya nodded, unable to speak. She grabbed her tips from the jar. $43 for an 8-hour shift. 3 of those dollars in quarters that weighed down her pocket. Changed out of her uniform in the tiny bathroom and headed to the bus stop. That night, lying in the darkness of her apartment, holding her sleeping children close, listening to Lucas's slightly wheezy breathing and Emma's soft snores, Maya didn't think about the man she'd saved, didn't wonder who he was or what would happen to him. She thought about the school supply list Emma had brought home. $67 worth of specific items, specific brands, things Maya couldn't afford. She thought about Lucas's asthma medication that was running dangerously low, about the $85 copay she didn't have. She thought about the eviction notice she'd hidden in her dresser drawer, crumpled and reread so many times the paper was soft as cloth. 30 days. The landlord had given her 30 days to come up with 3 months back rent, or they were out. $2,400. It might as well have been $2 million. She had bigger problems than one stranger's heart attack. Tomorrow she'd wake up at 5 a.m. and do it all over again. 3 days later, Maya was folding laundry on the worn couch, sorting tiny socks, matching Emma's school shirts, folding Lucas's superhero pajamas, when Emma's voice rang out from the window. "Mama! Mama, look at all the fancy cars!" Maya's stomach tightened immediately. In their neighborhood, fancy cars meant 3 things: repo men, police, or immigration. None of them good. She walked to the window. Emma pressed against it, with her nose leaving smudges on the glass. 3 black Mercedes were parked outside their building, gleaming in the afternoon sun like they'd landed from another planet. Tinted windows, polished chrome, the kind of cars that didn't exist in this part of Seattle. Maya's mind raced through worst-case scenarios. Had someone reported her for something? Was it about the missed rent? About Lucas's father, who disappeared 2 years ago without a trace? About her expired car registration for a car that didn't even run anymore? The knock came sharp and official. 3 precise raps that sounded like authority. Maya's hands shook as she opened the door. A woman stood there in a charcoal suit that fit like it had been made specifically for her body. Designer bag hanging from one shoulder. Makeup so perfect it looked airbrushed. She was everything Maya wasn't: polished, expensive, in control. "Ms. Torres? Ms. Maya Torres?" the woman asked, with a professional smile that showed very white teeth. "Yes?" Maya's voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "I'm Victoria Stone, representing the Chen Family Trust." She pulled out a business card. Thick, expensive paper, with embossed lettering. "May I have a moment of your time?" "I think you have the wrong apartment. You saved Richard Chen's life 3 nights ago at Rosario's Diner, the gentleman who suffered a cardiac event. May I come in?" Maya's confusion must have shown on her face because Victoria's smile softened slightly, became almost human. "I understand this is unexpected, but Mr. Chen and his family are very eager to properly thank you for your quick thinking and courage." Maya stepped aside, suddenly aware of how small her apartment was, how the couch sagged in the middle, how the walls needed paint, how the whole place smelled like the fried food from the restaurant downstairs, mixed with cheap laundry detergent. Victoria didn't seem to notice or care. She sat on the edge of the couch with perfect posture, set her bag beside her with practiced elegance, and pulled out a leather folder. The next hour was the most surreal of Maya's life. Victoria explained that Richard Chen, the impatient man at table 12, the man who'd waved her away without looking up, was a billionaire. Not millionaire, billionaire. The founder and CEO of TechCore Industries, one of the biggest tech companies in the Pacific Northwest. A man whose net worth had 10 digits. A man who owned buildings and companies and pieces of the future. And his family wanted to properly thank Maya for saving his life. "We've prepared a gratitude package," Victoria said, sliding papers across Maya's worn coffee table, the one she'd bought at Goodwill for $15. "We're prepared to offer you $50,000 as a token of our appreciation." Maya stared at the number on the paper. $50,000. The numbers seemed to vibrate, to pulse. That was more than she made in 2 years. That was Emma's college fund, Lucas's medical care for the next 5 years. That was the eviction notice erased. That was safety, security, breathing room. "I can't accept this," Maya heard herself say, the words coming from somewhere deep inside, somewhere she didn't fully understand. Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched slightly. "I'm sorry. I did what anyone would do. He was dying. He needed help." Maya's hands shook, but her voice was steady, getting stronger. "I don't need payment for being a decent human being, for doing the right thing. Ms. Torres, this is a very generous offer. I understand that. And please, tell Mr. Chen I'm grateful he values what I did. But I can't take money for saving someone's life. That's not..." She gestured helplessly. "That's not who I am. That's not what I teach my kids." Victoria studied her for a long moment, something like respect flickering in her eyes. "May I ask why?" "You clearly could use the money. No offense intended." "Because my kids are watching everything I do," Maya said, glancing at Emma, who was pretending to color, but was obviously listening to every word. "I teach them we help people because it's right, not because we get paid. If I took your money, what would that teach them? That kindness has a price tag? That we only do good things when there's a reward?" "I understand, but I can't." Maya stood, opening the door. "Please tell Mr. Chen I'm glad he's okay, that he's alive. That's enough for me. That's payment enough." After Victoria left, her expensive perfume lingering in the air, Maya sat on the floor and cried, deep, wrenching sobs that she muffled with her hands so the kids wouldn't hear. Had she just turned down her family's salvation because of pride? Because of principles? When Emma needed school supplies and Lucas needed medicine, and the landlord was counting down the days until eviction? Abuela found her there 20 minutes later, still crying, and held her without asking questions. Victoria returned 2 days later. This time, Richard Chen was with her. He looked different than Maya remembered from the diner. Healthier, obviously, but also humbled. Smaller somehow, despite his expensive clothes and confident posture. He looked at Maya like she was a person, not furniture. "Ms. Torres, thank you for seeing us," he said, his voice quiet. "I wanted to thank you personally, to look you in the eye and say the words." Maya made tea with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, using the mismatched mugs she'd collected over years, serving a billionaire in her cramped kitchen that smelled like beans and rice. A billionaire in her apartment, sitting on her sagging couch. "What you did," Richard continued, accepting the tea with both hands like it was precious, "wasn't just CPR, wasn't just medical intervention. You saw a stranger, a rude stranger, who barely acknowledged you, who treated you like you were invisible, and you chose to help anyway. You risked yourself. You didn't hesitate. Do you know how rare that is?" "I don't think it's that rare," Maya said. "People help each other all the time." "Not in my world." Richard's laugh was bitter. "In my world, everything has a price tag. People help because they want something. A favor, a connection, a photo opportunity. Genuine kindness, selfless action, that's extinct where I come from." He leaned forward. You refused $50,000, Victoria told me. She said you wouldn't take a penny. Why? Maya glanced at Emma's homework, scattered on the table, at Lucas's inhaler, sitting next to the sugar bowl. Because my kids are watching. Everything I do, every choice I make, they're learning from it. I teach them we help people because it's right, not because we get paid. If I took your money, what lesson would that teach them? That I lied? That kindness is actually for sale, just for the right price? Richard and Victoria exchanged a long look. Some silent communication passed between them. He nodded. Ms. Torres, Victoria began, pulling out new papers. We have a different proposal. Mr. Chen has been considering this since your refusal, and we'd like to present an alternative that might align with your values. She spread documents across the coffee table. Mr. Chen wants to fund a scholarship program specifically for children of service workers, wait staff, cleaners, hotel staff, drivers, custodians. People who keep our cities running, but whose children rarely get opportunities. We'd like you to run it. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Run it. Full-time position. Full salary and benefits. Health insurance for you and your children. You would identify candidates, review applications, partner with schools and community organizations. Real impact. Real change. Richard's eyes were intense, almost desperate. Turn your values into a system. Help thousands of kids like Emma and Lucas. It was perfect. Too perfect. The kind of perfect that meant there had to be a catch. What's the catch? Maya asked, her voice flat. Richard had the grace to look uncomfortable. My company is launching a new privacy initiative. My rivals will claim it's just PR, damage control after some recent controversies. Having someone like you, genuine, values-driven, from the community, as the face of our charitable work would help demonstrate our commitment is real. There it was. The hook. The trap. She wouldn't just be helping kids. She'd be a prop. A symbol. The poor Latina waitress that the rich tech billionaire saved. A story for press releases. I need to think about this, Maya said. Of course. Take all the time you need. Richard stood, handed her his own card. But Ms. Torres? Maya? I'm not trying to buy you. I'm not trying to use you. I'm trying to learn from you. Please think about it. That night, Maya sat with her abuela in the small kitchen, the one place in the apartment that felt safe. Her grandmother, who'd raised her after her parents died, who'd worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table, who'd taught Maya everything about dignity and pride and survival. Mija, tell me what troubles you, abuela said in Spanish, her weathered hands folding napkins out of habit, even though they weren't at work, even though there was no need. Maya explained everything. The heart attack, the money, the refusal, the new offer, the scholarship program, the PR angle. All of it spilled out, in a mixture of Spanish and English, her words tumbling over each other. Abuela listened without interrupting, her dark eyes watching Maya's face, reading all the things Maya wasn't saying. When Maya finally finished, Abuela was quiet for a long moment. When I came to this country, Abuela began slowly, I had a choice. A factory job that paid well but meant never seeing you and your brother. Night shifts, weekends, holidays. Good money, or cleaning houses, making less. But being there when you came home from school. Being there for dinner, for homework, for when you cried about the kids who made fun of your accent. She smiled, the lines around her eyes deepening. I chose you. Always you. Always family over money. But this is different, Abuela. Is it? Abuela reached across the table, took Maya's hands in hers. Hands that were rough from decades of work, from scrubbing other people's floors and toilets and mistakes. This man offers you money to be yourself, to help others the way you helped him. The question isn't whether he benefits. Everyone benefits when good things happen. The question is, can you do good work even if someone else also benefits? Can you help these children, even if a rich man's reputation improves? Is the good you can do worth the compromise? Maya thought about Emma. So smart, but stuck in an underfunded school where the textbooks were 10 years old and the computers didn't work half the time. About Lucas, who wheezed through soccer games because they couldn't afford the better medications, the specialist appointments. About thousands of other kids just like them, just as smart, just as deserving, just as trapped. What if I lose myself? Maya whispered. What if the money changes me? What if I become like them? Then you were never as strong as I thought, Abuela said simply. You think I didn't worry about that? You think every time someone offered me more money for less dignity, I didn't wonder if I should take it? But I knew who I was, and you know who you are, mija. That doesn't change because someone hands you a paycheck. Maya sat there in the quiet kitchen, listening to the refrigerator hum and the upstairs neighbors argue, and the city breathe outside their windows. I want conditions, Maya said suddenly, sitting up straighter. She called Victoria that night after the kids were asleep. I'll do it, but I have non-negotiable conditions. I'm listening, Victoria said, her voice neutral. I choose the recipients, no company approval needed, no vetting by your PR team. If I say a kid deserves the scholarship, they get it, period. Okay. No press events with scholarship kids as props. No photo ops where you parade them around. They're students, not publicity material. Understood. I work part-time at the diner. Saturdays. I won't forget where I came from. I won't lose touch with my community. That's non-negotiable. Those are my terms. All of them. If Mr. Chen can't accept that, then thank him for the offer, but I'm out. There was a long pause. Maya could hear muffled conversation in the background. Victoria's hand over the phone. Then, I'll call you back. Maya sat in the dark living room, watching the city lights through her window, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. An hour later, her phone rang. Mr. Chen accepts your terms, Victoria said, and Maya could hear the smile in her voice. All of them? He asked me to tell you something specific. He said, that's exactly why we chose you. Don't ever change. The first year was a whirlwind that left Maya dizzy and exhausted, and more fulfilled than she'd ever imagined possible. She interviewed hundreds of kids, children of janitors who cleaned office buildings at 3 a.m., children of nannies who raised other people's kids while their own waited at home, children of cooks and drivers and hotel housekeepers. Each one reminded her of Emma and Lucas. Each one deserved a chance. She sat across from a 16-year-old girl named Sophia, whose mother cleaned houses, and whose father had been deported when she was 8. Sophia wanted to be an engineer, had taught herself calculus from library books because her school didn't offer it. You're in, Maya said, watching Sophia's face transform from hope to disbelief to pure joy. She met Marcus, whose single father worked nights as a security guard, who slept through most of his classes because he was exhausted from taking care of his younger siblings. Marcus wanted to be a teacher, wanted to help kids like him. You're in, Maya said. The program grew. 20 scholarships became 50, then 100, then 200. Local news covered it, then national news, then international news. Former waitress transforms lives with billionaire-funded scholarships. The woman who wouldn't take the money and changed everything. But success brought scrutiny, attention, and enemies. TechCore's biggest rival, a company called Datafront, launched a formal investigation 6 months into the program. Their CEO, Mitchell Cross, a man known for ruthless business tactics and hostile takeovers, publicly claimed the scholarship program was a tax dodge, that Maya was a paid actress, that the whole thing was smoke and mirrors designed to distract from TechCore's privacy violations. He went on national television. "This so-called scholarship program is a PR stunt," Cross said, his face serious, his voice dripping with concern. "This woman, Maya Torres, is being paid handsomely to play a role. We've found no evidence these scholarships are real. It's a cynical manipulation of good people's trust." The pressure was immense. Maya's phone rang constantly. Reporters asking for comments, lawyers from TechCore strategizing, Victoria trying to coordinate responses. "Let me handle Cross," Victoria said, during an emergency meeting at TechCore's offices. Maya's first time in the building, 30 stories of glass and steel and money. "We have lawyers, PR teams, investigators. We can destroy him." "No," Maya said quietly. Everyone in the conference room turned to stare at her. Richard, Victoria, 5 lawyers, whose hourly rate probably exceeded Maya's former monthly salary. "Maya, he's destroying your reputation, attacking your integrity," Richard began. "Then I'll rebuild it the right way," Maya interrupted. She stood up, her second-hand blazer shabby in this room full of designer suits. "Not with lawyers, not with PR campaigns, with the truth." She pulled out her phone and called Mitchell Cross's office directly. His assistant tried to block her, but Maya was persistent. Finally, Cross got on the line. "Mr. Cross, this is Maya Torres, the paid actress. I'd like to invite you to shadow me for a day. See the program firsthand. Meet the students. Then you can make your accusations. Fair?" There was a long pause. "You're serious?" "Completely. Tomorrow. I'll pick you up at your office at 6 a.m. Wear comfortable shoes." Mitchell Cross showed up the next morning in a suit that probably cost $3,000, looking skeptical and vaguely disgusted, as Maya led him to her beat-up Honda that barely started. She brought him to the diner first. Made him sit at table 12, the same table where Richard Chen had collapsed, and watch her work her Saturday shift. Introduced him to Marco, to the regulars, to the life she still lived. Then to the community center, where she held workshops. He met Maria, a housekeeper, whose daughter got into Stanford through the program, who cried as she showed him the acceptance letter she kept in her purse. Met James, a driver whose son was studying engineering at MIT. Met 17-year-old Angela, who'd been homeless last year, who now had a full scholarship to Berkeley. "You think this is PR?" Maya asked, gesturing around the cramped room where 30 students sat working on college applications, where parents who didn't speak English practiced for citizenship tests, where the paint was peeling, but the hope was real. "This is my life. These are my people. Every kid here. I know their story. I know their struggles. I chose them myself. No committee. No corporate approval. Just me." Cross was quiet, his skeptical expression slowly crumbling, as he watched a mother break down crying when Maya told her that her daughter had been accepted to her dream school with full funding. He stayed the entire day, 12 hours. He watched Maya work, watched her interact with families, watched her review applications by hand, making notes in Spanish in the margins, calling students personally to tell them they'd been accepted. At the end of the day, as the sun set over Seattle, Cross stood in the parking lot of the community center, looking like he'd been hit by a truck. "I was wrong," he said simply. "This is real. You're real. I'm—" He stopped, his voice thick. "I'm sorry." 3 weeks later, Datafront announced their own scholarship program, not competing with TechCore's, partnering with it, doubling the number of students they could help. Cross called Maya personally. I spent 20 years in business, he said, made billions stepping on people. Then I met someone who turned down $50,000 because she didn't want to compromise her principles. You changed my mind about what matters. Thank you. 5 years later, Maya stood at a university gymnasium filled with 500 students, all scholarship recipients, all children of service workers, all kids who'd been told they couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't make it. Emma sat in the front row, now 13, and dreaming of becoming a doctor, straight A student, volunteer at the same community center where her mother worked. Lucas, 10, wanted to be an engineer like the students he'd met through the program. Both of them healthy, thriving, proud. 5 years ago, Maya began, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. I was a waitress living paycheck to paycheck, working double shifts, choosing between my son's medicine and my daughter's school supplies, facing eviction, drowning. She looked out at the faces, brown, black, white, Asian, every shade and story of struggling America. I saved a man's life not because I knew who he was, not because I wanted a reward, but because it was right. Because my abuela taught me that we help people, period. No conditions, no price tags. And that choice, that one moment of doing what I was raised to do, changed everything. Richard Chin sat in the back row, recovered and semi-retired now, spending his time funding programs like this across the country. Victoria sat beside him, less polished now, more human, having quit corporate law to run the foundation full-time. But not because of money, Maya continued. Not because some billionaire handed me a check and fixed my life. Because it reminded someone powerful that values matter, that people who serve deserve respect. That opportunity shouldn't depend on luck or zip code, or whose parents could afford the right schools. She gestured to the students. You're here because your parents worked hard, because they taught you what matters, because they sacrificed. Don't forget that when you're successful. Don't forget the last table, the last customer, the last person who needs help. Don't forget where you came from. Her voice broke slightly. I still work Saturdays at Rosario's. Still know every regular's order. Still remember what it feels like to choose between groceries and rent. I never want to forget. Because the day I forget is the day I stop being able to help people like us. After the speech, during the reception, a young reporter approached Maya. Do you ever regret not taking the original $50,000? That money could have solved all your problems immediately. Maya smiled, watching Emma help a nervous freshman find the scholarship application table, watching Lucas explain engineering concepts to a curious kid half his age. That money would have lasted a year, maybe 2, she said. This lasts forever. Those 500 students will help 500 more someday, and those will help 500 more. I didn't just change my life. I started a ripple that'll never stop. She looked at the reporter directly. I learned something that night on the diner floor, doing CPR on a stranger. I learned that the most valuable things we do are the things we do for free. That's what I want my kids to remember. What would you have done if someone offered to change your life after you helped them? Would you have taken the money and solved your immediate problems? Or would you have demanded something bigger, something that outlasts you? If this story of unexpected choices and staying true to yourself resonated with you, subscribe for more stories that remind us what really matters. Your support means everything. Thank you for being part of this journey. What we learn from this story is that the most powerful way to change your life isn't by accepting what desperation tempts you to take, but by staying so unshakably rooted in your values that you transform a moment of crisis into a movement that ripples through generations. Because money solves today's problems, but principles built into systems solve tomorrow's problems. for thousands of people you'll never meet.